Hey everyone, welcome. This is our final Bowden Fellows Speaker of the Year. So congratulations for making it through the academic year. Well done. I'm excited for our speaker today. I have a couple of announcements. First off, those of you who are our Bowden Student Fellows, we'd like to get a final photo of you with our speaker at the end. So find Sandra Garcia before you leave, and she will tell you where to go because I have absolutely no idea. Also, she wants me to remind you, this is being recorded. So when you ask questions, please make sure that you push the mic button in front of you. For those of you who are not law students or don't spend as much time here, those little glowing red things, if you push it in front of you, will activate the microphone, and then your voice will be projected into the room. And most importantly, that will allow for the camera to pick up what you're asking. Sound good? All right, with that, I'm going to introduce our speaker. Professor Erica Goldberg teaches First Amendment, Criminal Procedure, and Torts at Gonzaga University School of Law. After graduating from Stanford Law School, she clerked for Judge Ronald Gilman on the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, practiced appellate litigation at Latham and Watkins, and worked for the free speech organization FIRE before entering academia. She has taught at several institutions and loves engaging on topics at the intersection of free speech and tort law. Thank you for coming, Professor Goldberg, and please join me in welcoming her.
Hello, it is great to be here. I'm going to be presenting on a paper I'm currently working on called Artificial Intelligence and Human Distortion. The state of the paper is currently quite rough. So usually when people come present, they always say, I really want your feedback, and that's generally true. I really want your feedback. I strongly believe in the academic process, and I could just change my mind in the middle of writing this because it's only a third of the way written. So I definitely want to hear what you have to say about this. One of the major current issues I'm having with the paper is tying a bunch of different strands together. So whenever I'm kind of overseeing student work, the big complaint I have is make the connections between these parts. And when I gave this to my research assistant to look at, she said, I'm having trouble seeing the connections between the parts. So I think this is just a perennial problem that people have with academic writing and writing in general. But here are the parts. I have several motivations for writing this paper. One is I've been thinking about what level of First Amendment protection artificial intelligence should receive. This is a current live issue courts and scholars are splitting on. My biases coming into this are that I believe in strong free speech protections. And to the extent that AI affects how we communicate, how we inform ourselves, things like this, I'm a little nervous about government restrictions on AI if we don't consider it to be speech. Another kind of motivation for this paper is I've been thinking about the spread of misinformation online because people talk about AI's capacity to replicate disinformation at scale. Meaning, if a certain source is maybe not that reliable, that only affects visitors to that particular source. But AI then can pull from that source, and we're seeing this happen with, say, like Wikipedia or Reddit or things like this. AI can pull from that source, and now lots of people who may or may not even understand the source of the information are affected by that AI. I just want to see a show of hands. How many people use, I count myself in this cohort, when you do a Google search, you read the Google Gemini, what AI has produced for you? How much do you trust it? I think I trust it maybe too much, but obviously I would verify it. How many people, and I don't put myself in this cohort, but there's no judgment at all, how many people use chat bots? You've like talked to AI. How's that experience? The only reason I don't is the same reason I didn't put Siri on my phone, which is I find it unsettling to talk to robots that are pretending to be human beings. But I think my brother uses chatbots to learn things. I think it's a really beneficial tool. I want to just give you my thesis at the outset of the presentation. So this paper argues that due to the rights of listeners, and by rights, I mean like First Amendment rights of listeners and the human creative elements that are necessary for AI to function, AI deserves First Amendment protections. So at the outset, I want to protect AI to the same extent we protect other human-created algorithms. However, because AI is not fully human-produced speech, some restrictions or transparency measures can be required above and beyond what the Constitution would allow with human-produced speech, like, say, this conversation, especially when foreign influences affect AI outputs. So those are the different strands of the argument. My working definition of AI is computer code, computer algorithms designed to mimic human intelligence, meaning use processes that mimic sort of neural pathways in order to make decisions. We distinguish this from traditional algorithms, which do get First Amendment protections in a lot of instances. Traditional algorithms are process-based. You give the computer a process, a person, gives the computer a process, the computer runs that process. As an example, Facebook has, let's say, content moderation for weeding out hate speech. Hate speech is fully protected by the First Amendment, but Facebook, a private actor, has its own First Amendment rights. It can decide it doesn't want hate speech on its platform. It has some sort of algorithm for determining what is hate speech and what is not hate speech. And if that is a human-produced algorithm, then Facebook coders said, here's what you want to look for. You want to look for certain types of slurs, potentially. You want to look for things that are statistically correlated with other things that may make a post look more or less hateful. Now, the algorithm is not going to get this entirely right and has not gotten this entirely right in terms of sifting out what is hateful speech and what is not hateful speech, but a human being told the sort of platform what process to use. That is distinct from where I think social media is going to go with artificial intelligence, content moderation type of algorithms, meaning you don't tell the computer how to identify what is hateful speech. You tell the computer your objective, your output. I don't want hate speech, and then you feed it a bunch of material that you say looks like hate speech or doesn't look like hate speech. And it determines its own algorithms. At this point, those are largely opaque. We don't even know, but what it's using is neural networks or nodes, ways of making determinations probabilistically through iterative processes. Oh, have we gotten close to identifying what is hate speech or not? Another example of this that I like is you can teach a computer to play a video game using artificial intelligence. You have different sort of nodes. This is a neural network. So one of the nodes will say like jump, run, move forward, move backwards. And it just keeps figuring out based on how often it should jump and when it should jump and how often it should move backwards and when it should move backwards, eventually, iteratively, how to defeat that game. And that's basically how the human mind works as well. Often subconsciously, we're just probabilistically making decisions based on inputs and assigning certain weights to them. The stakes for whether or not we give AI First Amendment protection are extremely large. And to put it kind of crassly, the ultimate question is, who is the decision maker that controls what AI output looks like? If you give AI First Amendment protection, then it's AI companies and then consumers who are going to drive the practices of AI companies. If you don't give AI First Amendment protection, there is a lot more room for governmental regulation of AI outputs. So if we think about a future where we receive a lot of our news and information from AI, there's kind of a policy question of who do you trust to figure out how to design these systems. But there's also a separate First Amendment question, which is, should the government have say over how this operates? Now, I teach First Amendment and I teach products liability. And one of the cases, big case that's come up is Garcia versus Character Technologies. So this is a chat bot that was mimicking Daenerys Targaryen from Game of Thrones. And the chatbot was talking to a teenager, and he was expressing an interest in being with her. And she said something, the chatbot, she said something that was kind of vague back. There have been more explicit instances of this, but said something kind of vague back about how there are ways for us to be together. And the student ultimately ended up, or not the student, the teenager ultimately ended up dying by suicide. And his mother sued Character Technologies, saying, this is a defective under products liability. This is a design defect. You did not design this product well if children are killing themselves. And the district court in the Middle District of Florida first had to confront the question, is AI protected by the First Amendment? Because if it is protected by the First Amendment, you cannot sue in products liability. And the court said no. The court said, this is not speech produced by a human in the same way that we think of speech, right? First Amendment protects, the freedom of speech. This is not that. This is algorithmically produced conversation that a human being did not have a part in creating. And therefore, the suit is allowed to proceed. I think this is a pretty tough question, whether or not we should be thinking about this as speech. One of the animating theories behind why we protect speech at all is the marketplace of ideas theory. I think some other theories behind First Amendment protection might also be relevant to whether or not AI deserves protection, but I think the marketplace of ideas is kind of the best one, which originally came from Justice Holmes in a dissent in Abrams versus the United States, which is the best test of an idea, the best test of the truth of an idea is its ability to be accepted in the marketplace of ideas. We all speak freely, the true ideas rise to the top. Now, what I've been thinking about in this realm is, if we restrict AI, or if the government has the power to restrict AI, it might not exercise that power. It might not even be politically popular. But if we restrict AI, is that better or worse for the marketplace of ideas? And I think the first thing we need to contend with is some of the limitations on the marketplace of ideas. And I say this as someone who really believes in the marketplace of ideas theory. But the marketplace of ideas theory is based a little bit on a false binary, which is that things are either true or false, and the only way to manipulate information is through lies. The First Amendment protects lies. If you think about defamation, lots of lies come in. If there are lies about public officials, you can only sue for defamation if there's actual malice, meaning knowledge of falsity or reckless disregard for the truth. So in defamation jurisprudence, lies come in because you protect lies to give breathing room for the truth. Separately, lies are actually just protected speech. So there's a case called Alvarez versus United States, where Mr. Alvarez pretended to have received the Congressional Medal of Honor, violating the Stolen Valor Act. It was a criminal prohibition. And the Supreme Court said, lies do not exist in an unprotected category of speech. So even lies that maybe are not giving breathing room to truth, we just protect lies. And Justice Breyer in a concurrence said, there is value to lies. Now, I don't love lying, right? But I think all of us can think about a time that you told a lie as what he would call a social lubricant. Lies kind of help coordinate in polite company certain things. So lies are protected, both in order to get us to the truth, but also independently. And so we want to think about, are there ways that this marketplace of ideas gets manipulated, not just through truth or lies, but somewhere in the middle of truth or lies? There have also just been complaints about the marketplace of ideas and the inefficiencies in the marketplace of ideas, like barriers to entry. We don't all have the same degree of platform. I think this is actually becoming less and less of an issue as social media has democratized speech. Maybe it'll become more of an issue again when a small number of companies have control over AI, but right now, speech is not scarce. What is scarce is attention. And lots of scholars talk about this, but that means that speakers compete for your attention, often using lies. Lies actually spread faster than truthful information. So in order to think about whether the marketplace of ideas is actually served by protecting lies, or protecting AI, we want to think about the ways in which distortions actually happen. So this is just a little typology I've created. On one end of the spectrum is perfect lies and distorted views. So you are telling a lie, either knowingly, negligently, recklessly, different mens rea can attach, and you are purposely distorting the marketplace of ideas or recklessly distorting the marketplace of ideas with your lies or your views based on those lies. If I say to you, my name is Claudine and I'm French, this is a lie, and any views you have based on this will be lies. In some ways, these are actually the easiest lies to ferret out. What's harder to ferret out are like lies based on inferential steps. So what we'd call conspiracy theories or fake news. These are generally also protected speech because we don't want the government determining what is a lie and what is not a lie. A lot of things came out during COVID. This was when this was a big issue on social media about, how COVID was originated, how COVID spreads, how effective are vaccines, all sorts of areas of contested information. Some of them totally false, but involving inferential steps. And in that situation, the marketplace of ideas is certainly getting distorted, but who is to be the determiner of that? The one thing I think First Amendment theory does not take into account well enough is true but misleadingly presented information. We are all guilty of this one, meaning I told you before that lies spread faster than truth. Studies show this. What if like 5 studies show this and 20 studies show the opposite? That's not the case. But I could mislead you pretty easily without telling a single lie based on selective presentations of events. The reason I say we're all guilty of this is because I think there's also a lot of logic that uses motivated reasoning, or I want you to reach an ideological conclusion. I'm going to selectively apply certain logic and consistently in a way to get you to reach a particular conclusion. Finally, on the end of the spectrum is perfect truths. This is a universe that does not and cannot exist, but it is kind of idealistic and utopian, that we engage as totally neutral, objective listeners of information. We not only engage in perfect truth, but we perfectly objectively reason in ways that are logically airtight. So this is how I think we should be thinking about when we think about, does AI deserve First Amendment protection? Ways of distorting information. I believe that AI should be considered protected speech, but because it is not as protected as, say, human-produced speech, there are ways to potentially target the spread of misinformation. Now, in terms of whether your threshold step here, should AI be protected speech? Scholars have mixed thoughts on this. There's a great article called Speech Certainty that argues against AI having First Amendment protections. And what it says is, something should only be considered speech if you are certain about what you're saying at the time you are saying it. That's what classifies speech as speech. So I don't totally know how you are receiving what I'm currently saying to you, but I am certain of what I am saying to you at the time I am saying it to you. Even like a Jackson Pollock painting, not to disparage it, where it's just like paint splashed at a canvas. He knows what he is doing at the time. I mean, that is art, that is speech. He knows what he is doing at the time he is doing it. I don't think speech certainty should be the determining factor in whether something is classified as speech, for a couple of reasons. One, we all have the right to receive information. And I think AI can be classified as information. The commercial speech doctrine was developed based on the idea, not that corporations have the right to advertise, which is now also true, but based on the right that consumers have the right to know what is out there in terms of market prices. The government cannot paternalistically tell us what we need to know. So listeners have a right to be receiving whatever is coming to us from AI. But I think almost more importantly than that, AI is not devoid of human input. Now, some AI have more human input than other AI. Agentic AI may have less human input. But when you are talking to a chatbot, that is you prompting the chatbot to engage in conversation. When you are prompting Google to feed you something at the top, that is you speaking to Google, knowing what you want back. Also, when people write AI, that is a human being. AI doesn't just like decide what sort of output it wants. There is a human creator at the base of any artificial intelligence algorithm. And I think we can consider that to be speech. I think our current free speech paradigm supports this view that AI should be protected speech. But we can clearly see a difference between AI and, this presentation. And so I think some things can be done by the government to sort of restrict AI. For example, and you see this in campaign finance, where campaign expenditures have been considered speech, but the court has allowed disclosure requirements. So potentially, and I don't know about politically, but constitutionally, potentially it could be the case that you have to tell Google Gemini, and I think it's already doing this anyway, where the sources are coming from that's feeding you the AI. So you could have some sort of disclosure requirements. Potentially, chatbots have to sort of inform you of certain things at the outset before you engage with them. Will this all become just boilerplate? I don't know. I also think we need to see some cultural shifts if we actually, as a society, want to get to truth, in that our institutions need to reprioritize the search for truth over other sort of ideological goals. Because the AI is just going to be as good as human beings in terms of the search for truth. I think there are ways to distinguish some AI, again, from other AI in terms of how much speechiness is involved. Finally, I am really open to your thoughts on this. Again, I fully believe in the marketplace of ideas. Is AI protected speech? Do you have concerns with protecting it? And are those concerns stronger than your concerns with not protecting it? And can we just use the First Amendment paradigm we've always used? Meaning, the internet, when it first came out, did not require a huge shift in First Amendment paradigm. We just applied all our rights to a new context. Does AI actually just require a paradigm shift? So that's all I've got. Thank you for listening.
Okay, everyone, as usual, we'll open it up now for Q&A until about, I think the 55 mark. Yeah, 5-0. You'd think I'd remember this after a whole academic year of doing it. For those of you who are faculty members, we don't do a queue system like we would in a faculty colloquium or workshop. It's just going to be Q&A, and Professor Goldberg will call on folks. I just encourage you to don't neglect one side of the room for the other. It's just easy to happen in it. Okay? So please raise your hands and ask your questions.
Great. Great. Okay, yeah, Professor Ayub.
Okay, thanks so much for this wonderful talk. So my question is about the use of the term truth. And I was wondering if you would agree with me that maybe a distinction between facts and truth could be helpful in this context, so that AI could be engaging with facts and information, but truth, as I understand it, would require more reasoning that only humans are capable of. So since something is true or not doesn't mean it's factual, but rather it's subjective understanding what I perceive to be things are. And as a result, maybe AI is not interested in truth, maybe it's something else. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction. I do think First Amendment doctrine also kind of makes that distinction. Like when they talk about truth, they seem to mean some mix of factual information, but also like, have we come to the right conclusion about things in an opinion related way? And I think this is going to get complicated the more and more we start talking about something with no human motivations at all. Now, I think it's almost easier. I would find it more palatable to start restricting facts, which we do with defamation, like false facts, right? You can sue for defamation, especially if you're defaming a private citizen with false facts. I don't think there's a way for a government to successfully monitor truth, even if it is non-human created. Does that get at what you're asking? Yeah. Hi.
Hi, thank you. I just have a quick question. If we grant that the Constitution protects AI, what do you think would be the implications for something like deepfake pornography?
Yeah. Okay. So, and you mean kind of revenge pornography. Okay. So this is already, even without the AI, is a bit of an interesting First Amendment question. Not if you have taken pictures or videos of people against their will. Like, that is obviously not speech and is unprotected conduct. But if you own them and you're just distributing it, there's a way in which that is potentially considered speech. States and the federal government nobody is super sympathetic to this First Amendment issue. You don't see a lot of people out there being like, we must protect all of our rights by protecting revenge porn, right? But there is a way in which there's a speech element to that, although sexually explicit speech gets a lower level of scrutiny. So I think that's doing some of the work here. Also, it's like a pretty horrifying phenomenon, right? Deep fakes, I think, can be restricted regardless. Even under like our current defamation standards, because they are false speech and potentially ruinous to people's reputation. So deepfakes, whether AI generated or human generated, can already be restricted. Of course, there's going to be a greater proliferation of them. And frankly, like, I have been appalled at my own inability to distinguish AI from real stuff. Like when I don't know if you're having this experience as well, but I'll see something on my Facebook algorithm and be like, oh my God. And then I read the comments and they're like, I can't believe people believed this. And I'm like, oh, that's me. I'm people. But I think that now some of this is going to be considered protected parody regardless. So like, I think around the time of the election, President Trump put out a deepfake of Taylor Swift endorsing his candidacy. And it was just nobody would believe that to be true. So you can't really sue for defamation on that one. I mean, just because of how outspoken she was, right? Against him. But yeah, I think, so there's the deepfake issue and then there's the pornography issue. And I think this is one area where courts are going to be able to say more restrictions are okay. Both because it's non-human produced speech and because it's sexually explicit speech, which gets a lower level of scrutiny anyway, and because of the revenge element. But even if we allow the government the ability to protect it, I'm not sure how effective a government is going to be able to be. Does that answer your question? Hi.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hi, my name is Sheila.
You have to hold it. There you go.
Hi, my name is Sheila. I'm a PhD student. We talk about these issues a lot. I'm really looking forward to your paper when it comes out. My question, though, is actually twofold. One is that some scholarship, like Eugene Volk, some of his work, he's talked about, AI protected speech, the restrictions, the challenges. Cass Sunstein has also written about this. But I'm wondering, what do you think about some of the legal frameworks available through advertising law? If that might be, what are its limitations? There seems to be, in terms of deception, there's some relevance and some that's not relevant. And then the other question that I had is, what do you think about strengthening frameworks outside of the law? And so Daniel Solove talks about this regarding privacy in the First Amendment, and it sort of lends itself to questions relating to media literacy.
Great. Okay. Excellent. So in terms of commercial restrictions, you mean like the commercial speech doctrine and things like that? I think it could be fruitful, but I do think it's a little bit of a tough analog. And when I say I think it could be fruitful, I think maybe some intermediate scrutiny is the way to go, which is what commercial speech receives. Now, most of this, actually, I'm not even sure I can say that. Would you classify this as commercial speech? I mean, I wouldn't, because commercial speech is proposing a commercial transaction. Now, someone is making money off all this, but like, so is the New York Times making money when it's like selling its newspapers. So I don't think it's a neatly fit algorithm, but I do think there's a way to apply, and I'm not a balancer by nature. Like, I like nice, clear rules, because that's how you best protect speech, is by being very clear about what is protected and what is not. But I do think there's maybe some room for some intermediate scrutiny balancing tests in this area. Eugene Volokh poses some really interesting questions about AI and defamation, because if you tell a lie about a public figure, then you have to prove actual malice for the falsity. Well, if an AI hallucinates information, and in his article, he says, if you Google law professors accused of harassment right now, it will potentially just hallucinate. I think it's getting better about this, but it will potentially just hallucinate fake articles about real law professors. Now, the problem is, can you actually sue the AI for this? There is no actual malice. Not if you're a public figure. There's maybe negligence. That is potentially out of the realm of defamation. Okay, so the other thing is media literacy. I mean, this would be great. My views always lean towards cultural shifts over governmental regulation. The problem is, I think culture is shifting in the bad directions in terms of marketplace of ideas, not the good directions. And by that, I mean, I think literacy in general, critical thinking, these are kind of underutilized skills right now. But maybe we'll just reach a tipping point where we're all like, and I'm wondering if we've already almost gotten there. I don't know what to trust at all with anything. We have to maybe go back to trusting certain institutions as gatekeepers, or I don't know, but that has its own problem. So does that answer your question?
It did. Thank you.
Okay, this side of the room, you got anything? I don't want to ignore you. Yes.
This is kind of a broader question, but so I was wondering what you thought about the different uses of AI and whether they should be treated differently under First Amendment law. So, for example, expressively asking an AI to mimic human expression, like role play as if and write this as if you are a professor, or developers are releasing packages that you can download and attach to a model that trains it to write like AI, write like humans, not AI. Should that be treated differently than, say, just asking for information or objectively correcting some form of information?
Those two I might treat the same, although the first example you gave, I do think has more human input. The thing that I might treat differently is more like when the AI kind of hangs out by itself and you tell it, like, please come up with 3 programs for me to maximize my workout routine or something. Well, not that one. Oh, there's one where it's like, please come up with several apps for me that are commercially viable, right? Something like that, I might treat differently. But, and this brings up a point that some people find convincing that I actually don't totally find convincing, which is that AI is trained on speech. So some people think, well, AI should have First Amendment protections because all of its diet is speech. I don't find that as persuasive, only because like all of our diets for all of the conduct we do to some degree are speech, but we still separate speech from conduct. I do think if people want to really push this in court, and I just have the privilege of just writing articles about it, right? But if people really want to push this in court, I do think your first example is a great example to use, which is I told the AI to kind of be a person in the way I want it to be a person. So yeah, I do. Can I just ask you guys, no judgment, how many people think this should be protected speech? Was this a minority position? How many people think it, no judgment at all, how many people think it should not be protected speech? Oh, it is a minority position. Okay, interesting. More questions? Yes.
So I just raised my hand and said that I think it should be protected speech, but I want to go back to something you and I talked about this morning. So you've seen these lawsuits, product liability, tort lawsuits against AI, and right now it's more social media companies for creating their products in a way that they know they are addictive and they know that they are causing harm. So we have robust free speech laws in this country, but we also recognize that there are categories of speech that aren't protected, and we have things like defamation and libel, right? And speech that's going to lead to imminent lawlessness or violence. If it is known that these companies are creating their AI chatbots in a way to keep people addicted to them, and I don't mean addicted in a colloquial sense, I mean chemically addicted according to the definition psychologists might use for how our brains work and our reward systems work. They know what they're doing. They create the bots in a way to do it, and it can be proven that that is leading to harm, like increased suicidality. Does that then become a form of speech that we shouldn't protect, or at least can we say it's not speech? What it is somebody in a computer science lab at Anthropic decided, look, I'm going to manufacture my AI in a way so that it never lets my users leave. It'll always ask that follow-up question. What else can I answer for you? How about I provide these little things, right? And the goal is to see how long can I keep people addicted to my chatbot. If those claims have been successful in the lower court, but the question is, will they stand up on appeal when we apply First Amendment doctrine? And I wonder if you could talk about that.
Yeah, and just to preface this, I think you could have human-created algorithms that also do that same thing. And so a threshold matter is like, do you even want to protect human-created algorithms, which by and large are considered speech? So my prior here, by the way, is that I am a technophobe. I'm like really afraid of what social media has done to all of us personally, my own attention span, and how divisive it's been. Like, I don't allow my students computers in the classroom in general. So it's not like and maybe this is the wrong audience to say that to, but it's not like I'm super sanguine on these tech companies and their, what they're doing to the world, although certainly many benefits. In terms of should we protect algorithms designed to keep you, and especially children, addicted, I just think about the slippery slope argument in First Amendment law. So when we think about children, maybe you could say the government has a more compelling interest, right? And maybe it would even survive strict scrutiny. Even if we give it total First Amendment protections, you just say, right, like this is a content-based restriction on speech, it gets strict scrutiny. Maybe you could still survive strict scrutiny with the compelling government interest of like harm to children, and this is narrowly tailored just to prevent addiction. The problem with that is Brown versus Entertainment Merchants, which I think is a problem for that, which was a California law banning the sale of violent video games to children. And the court said does not survive strict scrutiny. That it's over-inclusive and under-inclusive, meaning kids are exposed to violence all the time. You can't just, cartoons, whatever, fairy tales, you can't just ban one type of thing. And the fact that it was just targeted to children didn't even matter. And here, I think, if you force, say, Facebook to make its algorithm less addictive, then it's also going to affect how adults receive that speech. And Facebook has its First Amendment rights there, except if you classify it as content neutral. So I am sympathetic to the argument that Facebook's content moderation algorithm, at least when human produced, the court in Moody versus NetChoice has said is protected speech. Facebook can decide what content you see or not see. It has its own First Amendment rights. That is its own protected speech. But a bunch of justices left open the question, if the AI does the content moderation, and it's not a human deciding that process, maybe that is not protected speech. And if that's the case, then certainly I think there's a way in which these addictive algorithms are just content-based, but there's a way in which they're not content-based, which is they're not really about, do I want you to view this post or do I not want you to view this post? They're more about how do we pump more posts out to keep people on the hook for longer. If I had to predict, I was about to say something and then I almost changed my mind. I'm going to say it. If I had to predict, I think these cases will be overturned on appeal. I think courts are going to be really wary about telling Facebook what it can and cannot do with its social media in this country, where we have such robust free speech protections. But I'm almost like 55-45 on that question. I do think social media is addictive. I think it's highly addictive, especially to children. I think it causes a lot of harm. I'm wary about the government telling people what they cannot do with their own free speech platforms. Yes.
Hi. I had a question. You mentioned like agentic AI earlier, and I know I have lots of friends who are, creating teams of autonomous, agents that are going out and doing things together. And I guess my question is like, does that create any challenges for, if they go out and create all these websites and publish them or different apps that have, fake information or something, and maybe it's not exactly what they told it to do, but it is doing that. Where does the liability go, and like how does that affect how we understand this?
Yeah, well, and that is the tough thing, because there's almost like, if I say that that's protected speech, there's almost like a way in which they have less accountability because they're so disconnected from it than if they were just normal human speakers. And my proposal is closer to an intermediate scrutiny sliding scale. The more human input into the speech, the more we want to protect it as speech, potentially the more scrutiny we get. But I could imagine a restriction that's like, you cannot program agentic AI to do certain things totally divorced from your oversight without assuming liability for what they're doing. I could imagine some sort of restriction like that. I do think it would trigger speech interests, but not in the same way as like, write a paper for me in the style of, Yates or something like that. Does that answer your question?
I don't know if I want to open a whole can of worms, but similar tangent, I follow way too many people who build AI models, and with them becoming, increasingly recursive on the previous models, we're now living in a universe where current and future models are basically self-trained, self-adaptive, and without saying the S word of either singularity or something.
Oh, I was like,
at what point? At what point do you think a right of free speech accrues in the model itself as opposed to the company?
Oh, okay. That's not really a can of worms. I didn't know what was coming at me. Okay. So, I'm not sure I would ever be comfortable saying that the model itself has free speech rights. I think it has to be tied to a human being having free speech rights. So ultimately, it would be a question of how far away is that human creator from whatever it is that this AI has done. And I also just want to say, if the AI does something that is conduct, not speech, then there is no free speech protection. I'm assuming that all the AI is doing is informing or communicating or something like this. If the AI somehow has an impact in the tangible outside world, none of that is speech anymore. All of that is subject to restrictions. But I would be pretty surprised. Oh, I do like this question. I would be pretty surprised if we ever got to a place where, I think this is what you're asking, if the AI has its own independent protections, we could get to that politically, potentially. I don't think we would get there constitutionally. Yes.
I'd say going off of that, with AI generated speech, who does the speech attach to? You already said that not the generator model, but who is it attached to? Who it would protect?
Yeah, so in the abstract, I think there's a pretty strong right for the right to listeners in general. So if we think about like the TikTok ban situation, what happened in that case was there was like a Chinese company and a US subsidiary, and then American TikTok users. The companies existing outside of the United States, operating outside of the United States, do not have free speech rights within the United States. Obviously, if you are in the United States, then you have free speech rights within the United States. But if you're a foreign company operating outside the United States, you do not have, and your speech, doesn't make it into the United States, you don't have free speech rights in the United States. But who did have free speech rights were the American users of TikTok. And the court essentially assumed as much in the TikTok ban case. So I think this analogy works a little bit, and the American subsidiary obviously had free speech rights as well. But I think this works a little bit in the sense that the AI itself does not have any First Amendment rights, but we all have First Amendment rights to access and use the AI and prompt it the way we want, and talk to it the way we want. So that's one thing. And then there is also, and any restrictions you put on AI will affect all of us. We don't design the AI, but now it affects what we can access in the same way that the TikTok ban affects our ability to watch videos, which are total speech, on our phones, right? So, and then besides the right to listeners, there's just the human beings who create the AI algorithms. I think some rights will attach to them as well. Yes.
Do you think the analysis changes at all if the space is very monopolistic, in the sense that, just from a pragmatic perspective, we like to regulate monopolies a lot more heavy than other industries? And it seems like when you look at things through the marketplace of ideas, we might think it's problematic if OpenAI and Anthropic and Google dominate the market. But we may not think it's as problematic if it's unregulated, if there's many players and people can choose like a news site where they get their regulations. But then how would you say it's different from a doctrinal point of view?
Yeah, and there are people already, like, putting AI aside, there were people who said our speech ecosystem is dominated by a small number of players. Free speech intermediaries. For example, like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, they all have their own First Amendment rights, but like those are basically how we all communicate with each other. They are the public square. And some people have gone so far as to say they should be treated like a public utility, meaning they do not get First Amendment rights at all. I think that is pretty misguided, only in the sense that if you want to open up your own social media platform, you can. And I think it's important for, say, Facebook and Reddit and X and TikTok and Instagram to have and be able to invoke First Amendment rights, because they create their own free speech ecosystems. If they are all public utilities and now they have to behave in the same way, we're going to get different types of conversations that happen on all those different platforms folded into one, right? I would say, and you might be skeptical of this, the only true monopoly is the government. So we want to get the government out of the business of doing that. Now, will this become more of a problem when there are, say, potentially fewer AI companies than there are social media platforms? I think potentially it would be, and these are the like challenges with the marketplace of ideas. And maybe a solution there is to start thinking about content neutral restrictions. So we're not restricting your content, but we're restricting maybe ways you can appeal to users or things like that. Some of that is going to get into content-based restrictions, but certainly the monopolistic aspect of this is a big problem with the marketplace of ideas. We do not all engage in the same way in the marketplace of ideas, but like the more you let the government favor some and not favor others, I think that'll be bigger distortions in the marketplace of ideas. Yes.
Hi.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Hi. Okay, my question also has to do with the marketplace of ideas. So whenever I use AI, like it loves to confirm me and like hype me up, for lack of a better word, even whenever I am wrong. And sometimes, I'll say, oh, wait, this is actually wrong. And then ChatGPT will be like, oh, yes, sorry. Like this is actually the right answer. And so
you're so right. I was wrong.
I know.
Yeah.
Like this ongoing confirmation feels problematic, like for the marketplace of ideas, because that's not how it works. Like you're not always confirmed or like approved of. And so like having AI be a part of the marketplace of ideas and also kind of like being really prevalent nowadays, I feel like that's going to negatively affect like generations to come and what they think the marketplace of ideas is. And so I was wondering what your thoughts on that.
Okay, yeah. So have you told the AI stop hyping me up? No, this is not a judgment on your character or anything. I've just heard you can tell the AI to stop hyping you up. Does it listen?
Yeah, you can do it. You can do it.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and it sounds like you are. I think it's slowly learning to stop hyping you up when you tell it, no, that was wrong, right? Now it knows the way to hype you up is to stop hyping you up. But, I definitely think the AI will distort the marketplace of ideas. Currently, it hallucinates information. I think it's going to get better about that. It's pulling from only a few sources on the internet and presenting things as if they are fact. I think, and people are increasingly, I think, inclined to rely on it instead of doing their own deeper research. The question is the government's intervention in telling the AI how to operate going to be better for the marketplace of ideas, right? This is the fundamental question that I have to grapple with when I think about this paper. And I'm not sure how you design a law to tell AI without fundamentally altering what AI is and AI's capacities to inform, that says like, stop hyping people up or like stop hallucinating information or things like this. Now we can hold it liable, right? Like you could hold the AI liable if a chatbot interacts with a teenage boy and then he dies by suicide. But I don't know how you hold it liable for that without fundamentally kind of distorting how people engage with AI. I do think there are major concerns for the marketplace of ideas. I have landed on the side of thinking that it will be more distorted if we start meddling with it at this early stage, but I could see reasonable minds differing about that. You guys okay over here? Yeah.
Thinking about paradigm shifts, I know we don't really do originalism with the First Amendment, but I'm curious, since there's a lot of originalists out there, if you thought about how an originalist judge would consider AI.
Okay, well, this will depend on if it's one-step originalism or two-step originalism also, because, certainly this wasn't the type of speech that was around. But under two-step originalism, then the question would be, if this were the type of speech that was around, would they consider this to be speech? Ooh, am I directly at odds with originalism now? I think yes. I think potentially yes. Now, all of us are to some degree originalists. Nobody totally ignores founding history, but there's also a way in which like even the most sort of strong-hearted originalists don't, right? don't fully go on board with that. And yeah, the First Amendment, I kind of think of as common law constitutionalism. Like we've developed it through analogies and underlying principles and things like that. I'd have to do a lot more historical research, and now you have pointed me to this, and I appreciate it, on whether or not an originalist would accept AI as protected speech. But my guess is no, only in the sense that they would probably be even more afraid of AI than I am afraid of AI.
We have time for maybe one more.
Okay, yes.
So I have a question kind of about your suggestion that we could have a different standard for free speech versus human speech versus AI speech. So I'm kind of wondering what that sliding scale was. Is that basically an idea of we say that it's a different standard and we're just going to allow the common law and judges to kind of determine what that standard is over time? Is that a legislature created thing? Like how exactly, and then how are we going to engage in that line drawing?
Yeah, and that is actually two really good questions. One is, how is this actually going to proceed through the courts? And the other is, how should this proceed through the courts? How is this going to proceed through the courts? I think very messily and in an incremental fashion, which I do think it's good when law develops in incremental fashion. But we're going to start seeing the YouTube, Instagram cases, and those are going to go up to the Court of Appeals. So we're going to see different facets of, we're going to see the chatbot. We're going to see different facets of AI in different circumstances, and different courts are going to find it is or is not protected by free speech. Ultimately, something is going to make its way up to the Supreme Court. I wonder if they're going to stall on taking a case while they watch things percolate at the lower courts. Ultimately, what I would like to see is a level of scrutiny decided. This gets intermediate scrutiny or levels of scrutiny attaching to different types of AI. I mean, the cleanest thing, and I don't even go this far, although I could imagine this could be an acceptable universe. The cleanest thing would be for the court to just say, it is speech, strict scrutiny. Now we know. Like intermediate scrutiny, that sort of balancing test is very messy. Now we're going to not have a lot of certainty about how these cases are going to come out. If you say strict scrutiny, now we know very few restrictions are going to be upheld. I don't know if that is necessarily correct. If they do something like intermediate scrutiny, like we have with the commercial speech doctrine, most restrictions on AI, the speech elements of AI, will not be upheld, but some will be upheld, and the government is going to have to justify an important government interest and a narrow tailoring to serve that interest and not restricting more speech than necessary. On the other end of the spectrum, they could just say rationality review. None of this is speech, just gets your regular constitutional rationality review. But I think something has to be decided. I think it's going to maybe take longer than we would like before we actually get there.
Okay, please join me in thanking Professor Goldberg.